Whispering Woods is in recovery. After an unexpected blow to the butterfly garden and the subsequent closure of the zoo, the Haven's finances aren't looking great. Until that is, the anonymous donation. Genevieve Joyce is relieved to say the least, but Jonathan Vaughn is reluctant to use the funds without more information. The arrival of more rescue animals puts the staff in a tough position. Take out a loan to house the Lynx additions, or use the mystery money to construct a new facility. Anna Kingston, the zoo's new Director of Education and Conservation, argues that the unanticipated gift will allow the Haven to reopen its doors and replenish its finances. Besides that, she has a sneaking suspicion about where the money came from. The staff take a vote and, outnumbered, Jonathan agrees to use the donation. Construction begins, working hard to welcome you back to Whispering Woods Wildlife Haven. First order of business today is a little bit of cheating to get through the zoo closure, which is entirely on me. It's just part of the story. But we are going to put all of the animals in the trade center, seeing as the zoo is still closed, so that we're at least not paying for having to feed them and give them medicine and house them and whatever else. So we are saving a little bit of money there, thankfully, because we are bleeding money. But today we are building for the Lynx. There are a few more rescues joining us at the Haven. This is the start of what I have mentally named Predator Ridge, even though we really don't have that many European predators. So other than the Lynx, I don't really know what else I'm going to put in here. Maybe like the Wolverine. If you have other suggestions, do let me know in the comments down below. So we are going to have an enclosure for 2 adults and then potentially up to 4 juveniles because their litters will range anywhere from 1 to 4. We're just going to build it in this small section right behind the Vicent barn. So I'm going to lay out the building first. I'm using just the same breeze block that I used on the barn across the way. It's going to be maybe not a super simple building. I ended up spending way more time on this than I thought I would. I think this entire build took about 10 hours, if not longer. But I am very happy with it. This is probably one of the buildings that is most inspired by pictures I saw online. So I will talk about that a little bit more later on. Of course, as soon as I pressed play, it started to rain and we are gonna wait it out, but we are hemorrhaging money. We used to have over 600,000 and now we are just halfway there. And that's a little bit strange, but anyway. The interior, I'm going to create some mesh barriers and they're going to be raised up on concrete so that the den is actually a raised platform that's higher up from the staff. And this is inspired by a picture I saw on ZooChat. Highly recommend ZooChat if you are looking for inspiration pictures. I've had a lot of people ask recently, oh, where do you get your inspiration for all of your builds? And truly, some of it is just my own imagination, but a lot of it is going on ZooChat and typing in whatever animal I'm looking for. So for this instance, it would have been Lynx enclosure, or Lynx habitat, and then just scrolling through the pictures on ZooChat. And these are all pictures taken by members of the ZooChat community, many of whom you will recognize from Planet Zoo or the YouTube community. And they will just go to zoos and take pictures and then post them on ZooChat, where we can look at them for inspiration. So highly recommend ZooChat, link in the description if you need help with inspiration. Back to what I was saying about the inspiration for this building. It was, I believe, Cosley Zoo, I want to say. Cosley Zoo was one of them, and then Tierpark Hellebrunn was another one. But I don't remember what exactly the inspiration for the interior was. But it was an indoor viewing area with the platforms raised up, and then they were filled with a bunch of trees. And it was just the indoor viewing experience for the Lynx. We're not going to have indoor viewing here. We are just going to have outdoor viewing. But the staff will be able to access these backstage areas. While there won't be a lot of foliage back here, we are going to give them a little bit of climbing. So now on to letting the Lynx out into their outdoor enclosure. I thought those doorways would be big enough, but of course they're not. So I'm just going to create a ramp down into the enclosure, and thankfully that does allow them to leave the backstage area. So we're just going to do that all across the way. As for the backstage, we're going to use our tables, which were created for the Fox backstage, I use these basically everywhere now, as well as some souvenir shop shelves. So these can actually be used outside of the souvenir shop. You can just recolor them for your backstage areas. The table does also stack really well for shelving units, so that's what I'm going to do here, and we're going to fill those in along the side. I also created a freezer, but unfortunately I wasn't able to record that, so I'll try to make sure to give some cinematics of that. I have also revamped my design process a little bit, especially after last week's episode with the old mill, where I did decals a little bit earlier in the process, because I always find that if I do them at the end, I'm already burnt out and I don't want to do them at all. So now they are just part of the design process, and that's why we're doing the entire backstage building first today and then heading outside into the outdoor enclosure. So you might notice that it is structured a little bit differently, and that is entirely on purpose. So do let me know if you prefer this method where we kind of do one thing at a time and we don't jump from one thing to the next, indoor, outdoor, indoor, outdoor. I know I'm so bad for that. I mean, my attention span is like pretty decent, but it definitely could be better. So we are going to clutter up the backstage with some more items such as tools and boxes and clipboards and all those fun things. And then we are going to move on to the doorways. So these will separate the indoor from the outdoor, obviously, but we're also going to have two separate enclosures that are also blocked off with a doorway like this one. And that's so that we can have a breeding pair, and then once the mother has her kits, she can move over to the other enclosure with them, and then the male can just stay in the on-show enclosure. The other one can be tarped off if need be. If the kids need some privacy, there will be two separate ones. I also like to add these little details to my backstages, like these switches and these lights to show whether the door is open or closed. As the menu says there, we don't have power over here at the moment, but once we do, one of those bulbs will be turned on and then the other one will be turned off. And that will just tell the keepers if the door is open or closed, just as a very quick visual cue. For the backstage area, I'm also going to design some climbing structures. The Lynx don't have climbing requirements in Planet Zoo, but they do love to climb in real life, so I thought I would put a few structures back here. Just adding some of these LED sign brackets underneath. And then we are on to roofing at sundown because that is just the time of day it was. But this is my first custom roof. Actually, that's a lie. Boreal Cafe also had a very custom roof. So maybe it's not my first custom roof, but it's the one that took the most effort, I think. First, I'm going to use these rectangles, and then I'm going to place my skylights down. This is basically the reason why I ended up doing a custom roof, because it's very difficult to have skylights that aren't just like the 4 meter by 4 meter glass panels if you want to have skylights in a gridded roof. Anytime you want skylights, you need it to be custom or off the grid at least. So that's why we're doing this in the first place. And I'm going to go on top of the rectangles with this Twilight pack piece. I've never used this before, but I found that if I could line up enough of them next to each other, it would give the illusion of the clay tiled roof that we have as a grid piece in the roofing section. So that's what I'm gonna do here. I'm just making sure that they're all in the right place, and then I'll make sure they're all in one group for easy selection. And then I'll slide it over to create a group of 4, and this I'll just rotate a few of the different pieces so that it's not the same pattern all the way across. It will still be a repeating pattern because I'm gonna copy and paste, but at least it won't be as bad as if every single one was the same direction. And then once I have a really big block, I can slide that across and fill in the gaps. And then I'm going to purposely take out a few of them so that we can see the skylights through it. Now I'm going to lift that roof up so it is not gone, don't worry. But I'm also going to do the same thing with a bunch of timber panels. And this is so that I can create an underside to the roof, or I guess a ceiling. And this is just going to be visible from the interior. And again, I just have to make sure that the skylights are visible through that. This took a little bit of time to do, but I am very happy with how it turned out. Then once that is recolored and put into place, I'm going to make sure that the walls go all the way up to the ceiling without peeking through to the other side. This is mostly so that the Lynx don't decide to just, you know, jump over the wall. They can climb up quite a ways, so we don't want them just jumping from one den to the next. And then I'm going to add some ventilation systems. I didn't like how how you could see the concrete through the vent, so I decided to use some full stops to create a blackout on the inside. Very extra, but oh well. Just all those little details that I love doing. And lastly, we're going to add a control panel. This was created for the Night House at SEZ, and I'm just gonna drop it in here as a blueprint. So finally, we are on to the exterior. These barriers and fences are once more inspired by a picture from ZooChat. I think this one is from Hellebrunn, and I wanted to have a suspended look. So I put down a grid piece because then it's really easy to carry things across using that same grid piece. And I measured out how the exterior beams would work, and then those interior marquee beams are going to be held by hinges to the larger beams on the outside, so that it creates a suspended panel look on the inside. I did also try using some girders, but they are unfortunately really thick, so we ended up going with our trusty metal beams and marquee beams. And once more, we'll just make sure those hinges are lined up, and then we'll bring them down the sides so that it is suspended from all 4 sides. This is a type of fence I have seen at zoos before, so I thought I would just go for it. And now I'm going to line off the enclosure with those. This side portion is going to be angled a bit, so I just placed down another gridded piece. I rotated it into the spot I wanted it to be, and then I rotated that whole group to make sure that it lined up with the fence and the building wall. Now the front of the enclosure is going to be lower down than the back, so I added another 2-meter-ish panel on top, and that's just so our top portion of the fences is all at the same height so that we can put our ceiling or our roof in, because this is an aviary style cat cage. So I have that central pole there, and then all of these ropes are going to go from each beam to that central pole. This took so long to do because you have to rotate it on multiple axes, and again, I'm not good at that. No, that's just not something I'm good at. So I won't be adding mesh to each rope because I value my sanity a little bit, maybe not completely, as you can see from what's happening on screen right now, but it does give that, again, suspended look. We want all of this to feel quite light, even with how heavy duty it is to keep in a carnivorous cat. We are also going to be planting it up with more Asian plants this time around. I know it's a Eurasian Lynx, so European plants could also work, but quite frankly, I'm a little bit over the European plants already. I know I did a whole zoo with just North American plants. I don't know how I did it, but I am really craving a little bit more variety. So for this enclosure, we're going to use some of the Japanese maple for a splash of color, as well as some Himalayan birch, some broken Himalayan pines, and then eventually for some of the foliage, some Siberian pea shrubs. However, do be careful with the pea shrubs because they are not traversable, and this is something I forgot when I was placing them, and I went a little bit crazy, and then my Lynx didn't have enough space. So do be careful with the non-traversable foliage. The rockwork, I'm trying to make it seem like a decently steep slope that the Lynx can climb all over. Just going back to see my sightlines once in a while. I actually really love the way that the rockwork turned out here, along with all of the foliage. It gives a sort of mountainous feel without feeling overwhelming. Like, it's not a super steep mountain, but it's definitely a hillside that the Lynx can climb all over because that's what they love to do. With the terrain painting, lots of rock and soil, and I did even dot the soil into the grass. Some people don't like the grass texture. I don't really like it either, but what you can do is you can just dot dirt into it, or soil, so that it doesn't seem so saturated. And you can just do that by clicking your mouse button multiple times. Does my finger hurt? Yes, it does, but it's totally worth it. It makes it look a lot better. I decided I wanted some climbing structures in the enclosure as well, so I decided to build a ladder. And that's mostly because a lot of the climbing pieces look really thin, like the ropes definitely wouldn't be able to support a lynx. I'm not sure about the thin climbing poles either. So I just decided to create my own ladder. I made sure to filter the items in the construction tab by climbable. So all of these custom areas are climbable because they do have that tag, which you can turn on and off, but obviously we're going to keep it on for the lynx. And once this enclosure is done, we're going to start work on the secondary outdoor enclosure, because even after getting rid of so many pea shrubs, that first enclosure didn't have enough room for even one lynx anymore, and I'm not quite sure why. But by lifting that doorway that you can see on the left on the fence, we'll be able to give them more room. They can travel between the two enclosures, and on the off chance where we do need to separate them, which is not something that's ever going to happen in Planet Zoo, we don't really need to worry about that, that doorway can be closed. So I'm doing some more terrain work here. This is basically what I did on that first half of the enclosure, but now that we're all done with that, I'm going to change the barriers to make sure that they encircle both enclosures, and then that will allow us to link them together and have only one habitat gate for the keepers. Once more, doing some more rock work. This area is going to be a little bit less steep. It does have a longer run at the back, except this front part will still have kind of shale-like rocks to give the same feel as the other lynx enclosure. The reason for this though is that this enclosure will likely have the lynx kits in it, which means that we want to give them lots of room to just run around, learn how to cat, essentially, such as these logs here. Lots of falling logs in this part because that's likely what they'll be learning how to climb first, something low to the ground. And then again, this is the pea shrub. It looks great. Like, I really love this plant, but you would think that a plant this tiny that is so similar to nettles and hedgerows and bracken would also be traversable, but that is unfortunately not the case. And then, of course, we need to work on some more annoying tension ropes for the roof. But somehow this part seemed a little bit easier the second time around. So remember, practice, practice, practice. Our lynx are settling into their new enclosure phenomenally, and we are so happy to see them here at the Haven. In other news, the butterflies have been returned to the garden, which means that the Haven can once more open its doors. Thankfully, because the Haven is currently sitting around $150,000, which sounds like a lot still, but definitely not as much as it used to be, especially if they hope to rehabilitate more animals in the future. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what your favorite part was, what you would like to see in the future, and I will see you next time. Bye.